you ever heard of a church grim? Hi guys, and welcome to Curious Bunny. In this new series we'll be discussing strange and forgotten stories from British folklore, and we'll bring them back to life with art. In each episode I'll discuss the story behind the folklore and show you how I make the artwork. And if you'd like to own any pieces inspired by the stories today, then you can find them in my shop, and I'll leave the link in the description below. So let's explore some of the stories that our ancestors once forgot. Today we're going to talk about the church grim, and I'm not sure if you will have heard of it. It's a bit of a lesser known folklore which has been documented in parts of Britain. Imagine it's the year 1200. The sun has set long ago. The only light comes from a thin crescent moon hanging in the sky over the church tower. You've stayed longer than you meant to, and now the quickest way home is through the churchyard. The air is cold and the village is silent. Each of your footsteps crunch loudly on the gravel path. You pull your cloak round you a little tighter. Tell yourself not to be ridiculous. It's only a churchyard. But as you pass between the old gravestones, something catches your eye. Standing perfectly still in the shadow is a huge black dog. It doesn't bark or growl, it just watches you. Its eyes seem to shine in the darkness, and for a moment, neither of you moves. You feel your heart begin to race, and then just as suddenly as you noticed it, it's gone. The next morning you tell the villagers what you saw, but instead of looking frightened, they smile. And they say, "Don't worry, it's only the church grim." And these are the ancient guardians that have watched over churches longer than anyone can remember. This creature was believed to be the guardian of the church, and people across England believed that every church had one. At that time, people who passed away were buried at the local church, making churchyards incredibly important to the community. And disturbing graves wasn't just illegal, it was sacrilegious. It was common belief back then that ghosts, witches, demons and evil spirits existed, so a supernatural guardian watching over the churchyard wouldn't have seemed impossible. One thing I didn't realise while researching this is that medieval churchyards weren't always the quiet places we think of today. They were often at the heart of village life, where people gathered for worship and burials, but also for things like meetings, announcements, and sometimes even markets and fairs. So when people believed the church grim watched over the graveyard, it wasn't just guarding the dead, it was protecting one of the community's most important church spaces. It was usually described as a massive black dog that could be seen wandering between gravestones, sitting in the church tower, or just kind of chilling silently in the shadows. But despite how terrifying this could sound, it wasn't actually thought to be evil. Its whole job was to protect the churchyard from anyone who wanted to harm it, like from thieves, vandals, or witches. Some stories even say the devil himself. One of the oldest legends says that the first person buried in a churchyard would have to guard it forever, which isn't really something you would want to volunteer for yourself or for a loved one who's just passed away. So instead, a black dog was buried beneath the foundations of the church, and its spirit became the guardian instead. According to folklore, the church grim is also seen at funerals. Imagine you've gathered outside the village church for a funeral. The services ended and the mourners slowly follow the coffin through the churchyard. Most people would keep their eyes lowered, but you glance towards the church porch. Standing there, almost hidden in the shadows, is the church grim. It isn't threatening anyone, it's just watching the procession in silence. The old stories say that if you were brave enough to look at the expression on its face, you could tell where the soul of the person had gone. If the grim looked calm, even content, then the soul had found peace. But if its face was sorrowful or troubled, people believed the soul was destined for a darker fate. It's kind of hard to imagine these expressions on the church grim's face. I don't have a church grim, but I do have a dog, so let's test it out. Does he know? He doesn't know. But that's okay. Now imagine you've lived your life in this whole village. One night, just after midnight, you're lying in bed when suddenly you are woken up by the sound of the church bells beginning to ring. The sound echoes through the village, slowly and deliberately. You sit up to listen. It's strange because nobody should be in the bell tower at this hour. By morning, the whole village is quietly whispering about it. Someone claims they saw the church grim in the churchyard that night. And according to old folklore, when the bells ring by themselves after midnight, somewhere in the village, before long, someone would pass away. It wasn't because the church grim had caused anything to happen. It was because it already knew. The grim wasn't seen as a bringer of death, but was thought to be able to recognise when death was close. Interestingly, a lot of other black dogs mentioned in British folklore aren't described as friendly creatures. The black Shuck, for example, was thought to be an omen of death and disaster. I think that's what makes the church grim so unusual, because despite it being described as looking quite terrifying, it was never really seen as a villain or something to fear. There are lots of folklore surrounding graveyards, and in parts of Scotland they didn't believe in the church grim, but instead it was the last person buried in that churchyard who then had to guard it. So every funeral meant changing shifts. So imagine you pass away and then you guard the churchyard for a few weeks until the next person passes away and they take over. I think it's interesting how different parts of Britain had similar comforting folklore that whether it was a dog or a human, there was always something watching over the churchyard and their loved ones. I think the church grim is one of my favourite pieces of British folklore because it turns something that at first seems quite frightening into something really comforting. Instead of being a monster, it's a guardian, and I like the thought that every old church might have one. So here it is. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed hearing about the church grim. If you'd like to hear more forgotten stories from British folklore, I would love for you to subscribe so you don't miss the next strange tale. And if you'd like to give this church grim a home of your own, then there's prints and matching stickers in my shop, and I'll leave the link in the description below. Also let me know if you've encountered a church grim yourself, or if you have a favourite British folklore piece that you would like to see drawn, then please leave me a comment. Next time we will leave the churchyard behind and go to the windswept coast of Britain in search of the mysterious hagstone, a small stone with a big legend. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.